Welcome to Global Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina.
Well, welcome. My name is Tawa Folabi. Really happy that you're joining us today. I work at the University of Regina at the Center for Social Engaged Theatre, and I'm really excited that we're engaging together today. As we normally do at the university and for many organizations in Regina, in Saskatchewan, and of course across the country, we do land acknowledgement, and we also do that at the center, absolutely. But for us, it's also really connecting to some of the ethos and the work that we do. So with that, I want to start by saying that where the University of Regina is situated, on 34, which is in Regina, is the homeland of the Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis and Métis nations. And for us, the work around social justice, really issues, whether it's policing, whether it's climate, whether it's racism or race relations, whether it's really speaking about issues of change, whether it's around cultural policy, the culture and creative industries, and many things that we're doing all really border around finding ways to create an equitable systems in our society. So with that, I want to say welcome again. And welcome to two organizations, art organizations in Saskatchewan that we're spotlighting in this month's CSET talk, and then we're going to be hearing from them just in a jiffy. To kind of give you a little bit of context, CSET talk we've been doing it over since the inception of the center. But really, I started thinking, and we've been engaging with many of these art organizations, right from the get-go, and personally in different shapes and forms I've been engaging with them. But I also thought that there might be an opportunity for us to really take a step back and invite us into a conversation. Many years ago, with SATP, we had the opportunity to do some things that involved the art organization in Saskatchewan. And we want to also be finding ways to bring us together to start asking ourselves, what are the things folks are doing? Programs change, leadership change, different things like that. And so really, this is like a refresher, just really spotlighting what we do in the community. The second thing also is that opportunity to be able to just, get to meet and get to know one another and connect the town and gown, which is part of my own mandate personally in my work, whether prior to the university and now that I'm in the university. I'm always interested in connecting the academia and the community together. So between now and May, we're going to be engaging with, I believe, 10 art organizations in Saskatchewan. And we're sorry that we can't take everyone, but we're hoping that we're going to have another series, as things permit, or, who knows, somebody might even pick this up as a way to get us going. So in our first episode, which is today, we're engaging with two organizations being led by two amazing, strong powerhouse women. And I've, of course, engaged with both organizations and both leaders. So with that, I'm just going to do a quick intro of Danielle Richardson, who is the executive director at Weal, which I was the chair of Weal as of May. I stepped down last year, May, and I was there for X number of years. Danielle Richardson is a spoken word poet and community organizer from Saskatoon. She currently serves as the executive director of Weal Community Arts. Richardson is an independent interdisciplinary theater creator who explores language, collaborative creation, camp, and the liminal space for her productions. She's currently the spoken word poetry editor of Arc Poetry Magazine, and of course, she lives with her spouse, child, and cat in Saskatoon. So with that, I'll pass it to Danielle. And I want to say, if you have any question, please put it in the chat. And then with that, I'll pass it on to Danielle to give us a quick overview of your presentation on art for social change and the work that you do at Weal. And then after that, we'll come back to Nena. So over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Taiwo, for that general and generous introduction. Yes, my name is Danielle Richardson, and I'm so thankful to get to work at Commonweal Community Arts. Commonweal, we work across Saskatchewan, so we are a provincial arts organization that has offices and staff that live and work in Regina, Saskatoon, and Prince Albert. Um, I myself am living on Treaty 6 as a guest, and I want to just acknowledge that that is the home of the Cree, Dakota, Dene, Lakota, Nakota, and Saulteaux Métis peoples. I'm very thankful to get to create and work in that space. But I do also want to acknowledge that Commonweal's work spans communities located in Treaty 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, because we are a provincial arts organization. So what do we do? Well, Commonweal Community Arts was born in 1992. We started as Commonweal Community Plays. So we were involved in the process of creating collaboratively with communities, co-creation with communities. And that began with the work Kamimopasik in Capel Valley in 1992. Over that decade, we eventually began to work in other disciplines as well. And in 1999, we incorporated as Commonweal Community Arts. And now we work in all artistic disciplines, dance, poetry, writing. Uh, we're doing some things in ballroom with queer communities right now across the province. Theater, of course. But it's a interesting and exciting world of working collaboratively with communities and socially engaged artists to create programming that helps us achieve a more equitable and just society. And I know that is a pretty lofty mission for an organization to have, saying we're going to make art and therefore it will change the world. But as artists, and creative people, I think that we all know individually and collectively how powerful the arts are and what a change I know they've made in my life and my ability to express myself as an independent artist, as a collaborator, but also as an administrator who's working in this space to try to expand the capacity of independent artists and individual artists, as well as smaller organizations and grassroots collectives that maybe need some more administrative support to get their programs into communities, get them funded, and make sure things are moving towards production. So, one of the major tenets of our work is adaptability. We try very hard to not be prescriptive and take artists from outside of a community, transplant them in somewhere, and say, okay, now you're going to go work with these people and you will support them and then you'll leave and our job will be done. We don't want to parachute in and out because we know that harm can come from those extractive relationships. It's really important to us that the artists that we're working with have a relationship already with the community that they're serving. Um, and that we identify artists to partner with that are already championing socially engaged practice in their individual works. And then we get to kind of be matchmaker to help support them in creating their vision for either a long-term project. Like I think of artists like Cheryl Larondel, who her work working in correctional institutions, doing songwriting workshops with community members, specifically at Pine Grove Correctional Center out of Prince Albert, led to a series of co-created songs that decades later have become an interactive digital media exhibit that's toured to now 3 different art galleries and impacted several communities across our province. And again, in theater, we're trying to work to create spaces for conversation and dialogue. And how do we do that in a way that breaks down the gaps and the space between the performers on a stage and the audiences in the seats? What if there was more back and forth and communication in that? So we love to experiment and we love to play with new forms. And that's something that we're doing right now with a series of workshops, something that I have heard in my entire career in interdisciplinary art and in the theater worlds is that it can be really hard to hire diverse performers on stage because they don't have the training that is required for them to be eligible to be cast in certain parts, in certain roles. And I'm aware that a lot of organizations are working hard to combat that, but that has been a conversation we've heard a lot of in Saskatchewan over the last 20 years. And so we were fortunate to receive some funding from the Department of Canadian Heritage to fund a rather ambitious project called Creating Shared Futures. And in it, our Southern Artistic Director, who is curating this work, is bringing together Black and Indigenous theater creators to connect with each other and to learn relationally from each other and each other's cultures to build skills and capacity individually, but also collectively. So we brought in Marnie Badham, who is a former general manager of Commonweal Community Arts. We brought her up from Australia, where she has been teaching in socially engaged practice and site-specific theater. And she partnered with Jolie Big Eagle Kukwataway to produce a workshop on taking care of each other and how do we talk about hard things without inflicting harm on each other in those spaces. So it's rooted in reciprocity and care and moving at the speed of trust. So that workshop happened in October. And then the next week, we had David Diamond come in from Vancouver, and he supported them in working through power play workshops, which culminated in a performance at the Artesian last weekend on Saturday, where they explored their workshop materials through a performance-based method. The next workshops will be with Kathleen Irwin. They're going to be going into Hotel Saskatchewan, into some of their very historic spaces in that building, and using it as inspiration to create some site-specific, devised and collaborative work, just to see what the possibilities are and how they feel connected to that physical space, give them a space to experiment and play. And in the next phase, we will be working on dramaturgy in partnership with Saskatchewan Writers Guild, bringing in Peace Akintade and Curtis Petitus to support their own script writing. Our hope with this first phase of Creating Shared Futures is that we can really build relationships and build a strong foundation with our artists that are being mentored, as well as the mentoring artists, to eventually create productions with this group. So we want to support them in seeing through funding applications, professional development, mentorship, just giving them opportunities to play, while also supporting them financially for their time and effort being in those spaces. Because a lot of mentorship spaces, again, unintentionally or for the fact that we have bare bones budgets, can feel a little bit extractive of folks' energy and time and effort. And so I'm really curious and excited to see where these creatives and artists take their work into the next season of things. And I'm very excited for us to find the partnerships and collaborations to really help us lead their work to the production phase in the future. And I don't know how that will look because it's not up to me. It's not up to either our Southern Artistic Director either. It is up to the participants and what our artists, we want them to chase their passions and creativity. This giving them a starting point, giving them some of the tools and the language to then be able to tell us what they need in support for that next phase. And then we can find ways to administratively support them and help them expand their capacity for independent production, or maybe that even leads to collaboration with other professional producers across the province or beyond. So that's a project I'm really excited about, just in my own nerdy theater appreciating way. And I thought it would be prudent to share it with this group here. It's an honor to get to work in this space. I didn't realize as a poet, kind of moving through the system, how much my future work life would be focused on budgets and on administration. And at first, I saw that as kind of like overwhelming and less flashy and fun of being the performer, being the artist on stage. However, I feel a very large amount of gratitude and pride in being able to create space and opportunities for other people to um, have their visions come to life. And so I think that's something really special about the capacity and legacy that Weal as an organization has, is that we can kind of use our legacy as an organization or organizational privilege to support folks that need it and who have been left behind or marginalized through this sector. And it is such a gift to be able to be a small prong in the wheel that helps move change in this sector. So, yeah, I could wax on all day, but I have a hunch that my 15 minutes have nearly come and gone. So if there are any questions or any responses or feedback to any of that, I would love to speak more about it with all of you. Thanks for sharing this space with us, Taiwo.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And I think there's a question. We're going to come back to questioning. There's a question there already, so we'll come back to that. But in addition to what that, I also wanted to start thinking of a line of question that kind of pop out for me is, how do we synergize rather than do the same thing 100 times? And a lot of the programming that happens in the province, we have shades of that happening already in different forms. So how do we, because you mentioned partnership, you mentioned the need to, how do we sustain that? So we'll come back to question, but just wanted to drop that for you to think as we think through and all that. I want to bring Nena Hawkes. I want to bring Nena in. She's the outgoing executive director of Theatre Saskatchewan Incorporated. It's a provincial nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting community theater groups across Saskatchewan. In this role, Nena works to strengthen the connections between avocational theater makers and their communities so that local stories can flourish on stages throughout the province. And one of the reasons why I ideally acknowledge and appreciate work that Theatre Saskatchewan does, of course I do for every theater and every art organization, is that especially when an organization focuses on amateur theater, there are a lot of systemic barriers to that, full stop. Our policies are designed in a way that it privileges professional over amateur. And we all know that even the professional started from so the amateur is the way you groom the talent, there's a different operations around it. But we don't necessarily privilege that. I don't know if Nena is going to speak to that, but I'm just bringing that to the fore. And I'm saying that because when I was developing Future Prairie Theatre project, this was something that kept coming back each time I meet. And some organization feel like a theater company like the art organization like Theatre Saskatchewan should have been in the room with them because they are amateur. Or Theatre Saskatchewan think that, no, we're not coming for that conversation because it's for the professional, we're the amateur. And I'm like, no, I'm here to shatter those glasses. I'm sorry. We're part of the ecosystem. We're part of one ecosystem. And yes, some might be the leg, some might be the hand, but the hand can't say that the leg is not useful, and then we just shut it down because they're amateur. So just wanted to mention that because I've had that conversation over and over beyond Saskatchewan in other spaces, both nationally and even beyond Canada. Born and raised on Treaty 4 territory, Nena brings a deep commitment to community-centered art practice. Her path has been shaped by the experiences across the non-profit art sector, including her previous role at Commonweal Community Art. So I got to know Nena in Commonweal back in the day, where she developed her understanding of socially engaged practice and its ability to strengthen communities. Nena's work centers on the belief that theater thrives when it emerges from and serves the communities creating it, whether connecting rural theater groups with professional facilitators, developing programming that addresses real community needs, or simply showing up to witness the stories being told on stages across Saskatchewan. She approaches her work with genuine curiosity about what communities want to express and how Theatre Saskatchewan could or can support that expression. When she's not working, Nena can be found creating something messy, playing board games, exploring the beauty of Saskatchewan, or instigating spontaneous kitchen dance parties. With that, I pass it to Nena to give a spiel. Yeah, yeah, party, yes. Over to you, Nena.
Thank you so much, Taiwo. It's so funny. I write my own bios, but then when people speak them, before I get a chance to talk, I always get it's always a little bit like, oh, did I
Did I read
nice
that?
things about me? Thank you so much. I'll do a little intro to Theatre Saskatchewan, just a little bit more. And I do want to, Taiwo, touch on what you brought up about that shift between the avocational and the professional theater worlds in our province, because it isn't in my notes, but I think it's really important to touch on. So Theatre Saskatchewan was formed in 1932 under the direction of the Governor General, actually. So it's been an essential part of the province's arts ecology for over 93 years. So since those days when it was really just like a let's get some amateur theater on stage in Saskatchewan, we've really shifted to become evolved into a dynamic member organization. We have groups of all sizes. We have groups that have 600 members. We have groups that have 6 members. And we really try to provide our member groups with education, advocacy, and opportunities to perform, to learn, and to connect. Our dream really is for avocational theater groups in the province to thrive and remain deeply connected both with their local communities and each other, and with the greater Saskatchewan arts ecology as a whole. Yeah. So, uh, full disclosure, as Taiwo said, I'm the outgoing executive director. It's actually my last day today. The timing of this is very funny, but it also is really meaningful to me to be able to reflect on my approach to this work, which has been really impacted by the incredible opportunities that I've had to work with organizations like Weal, and with all of our member organizations as well. Saskatchewan is a very unique province in that in larger centers like Toronto or Vancouver, that the difference between avocational and professional theater can be very, very stark. There can be quite a contrast. In Saskatchewan, there's a lot of gray area there. We will see equity members on stage in community theater productions. We can see, folks who have only really had a lot of experience doing community theater productions on stage at the Globe or Persephone. And then that's sort of the launch point for them to become professional theater artists. And so it's been very interesting to navigate this sort of us versus them mentality that can still persist. I've seen that start to fade quite a bit. And a lot of it really is just rooted in conversation. Like why are we doing this work? What are our similarities? I've been chatting a lot with Judith Schultz at the Saskatchewan Association of Theatre Professionals, SATP, about what a partnership between the two of us could look like. What are our shared goals? And I really think that bringing these two kind of sides of the theater community together there are more pros than cons with that. So Taiwo you and I have chatted about this a few times for sure. But I think that one of the things I've learned about art, particularly community-based art, is that we, Theatre Saskatchewan, as a professionally led organization, yes, we are working with communities. Yes, we are working with avocational artists, but that doesn't make the work that we do any less important or any less professional. So, yeah, I just wanted to address that before I launched into things. I'm sure that I'll come back. I got into community arts work because I believe really deeply in the power of storytelling to bring people together. As Taiwo said, I used to work with Weal, and what really drew me into this work and continues to drive me is the idea that theater art, but theater in particular, I'm a grown-up theater kid, at its best creates space for connection, not just between the performers and the audiences, but within the communities themselves. So I started at Theatre Saskatchewan in January of 2023, and we were in the middle of a significant transition. Beyond the administrative side of that, though, I was really invested in asking, how do we actually build theater that reflects and strengthens the communities that we're working with? So not just in theory, but also in practice. A lot of our community theater groups will describe themselves as being community-based or say that they're open to everyone. And I genuinely believe that that intention is real, and that the groups that I've worked with and had conversations with, I know care very deeply about their communities. But I kept coming back to that question about the practice of community-based art. And if we're saying that theater is for everyone, whose stories are we telling? Who is it that's on stage? Who's making decisions about what's getting produced? And maybe most importantly, who is not at the table yet and why? And when I started asking these questions, it was really important that I shared with the communities I was talking with that these aren't gotcha questions. They're genuinely just curious. Because after countless conversations with my member groups and their communities, I know that those of us involved in community theater have good intentions, but we don't always have the tools to know how to translate those intentions into practice. So my approach over the last 3 years has been about creating space for groups to explore these questions themselves, not coming in with answers or mandates, similar to what Danielle was sharing. Like, we don't want to just parachute in and be like, this is how you do things, and then leave and like hope something sticks. It really is what asking those questions, like, what would it look like for your theater to truly reflect your community, and what kind of support would help you get there? So one of the first things that I think it's important that we realize when we're in a leadership position is that we can't mandate culture change. I can't run into a volunteer-run community theater group, just, drive 6 hours to wherever I'm going and say, you have to do X, Y, Z, and expect that that's going to lead to meaningful transformation. What we can do is build relationships. We can listen, and we can ask what people actually need. So that's where I started, asking questions, visiting groups, having conversations. I've started this thing every summer where I go on a little road trip on one, area of the province, and I try to hit as many of our member groups as I can, which can be tough in the summer. Lots of people are away. But I started asking those questions. What are you struggling with? What keeps you up at night? What would make your work easier? A lot of our member groups are very small. It's the same 10 to 15 volunteers that have been doing this work for years, or who are trying to, pick up the mantle after some of the old guard have had to leave for health reasons or age-related reasons or anything. And what I heard was pretty consistent. So groups were rebuilding after the pandemic, and I know that that seems so long ago, but the impact on the arts community is still felt. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. Everyone in this room is still feeling that. And we are seeing wins, and we are seeing returns to some of those pre-pandemic audience numbers, but there is still a tangible impact, whether that is in a loss of volunteers or in institutional knowledge. A lot of my member groups were feeling stretched thin and honestly just unsure how to move forward. A lot of groups folded. A lot of groups are like reimagining what things are going to look like. And it started becoming pretty obvious that before we could talk about whose stories are getting told, we needed to help groups feel stable enough to take those creative risks. We needed to provide practical support that met them where they were. So with that in mind, I started making some small tweaks to some of our programming. One example that really stands out for me is how we are approaching our annual festival programming. So traditionally, and back in 1932, community theater festivals in this model would have an adjudication. So we'd, fly in an adjudicator from England. They'd watch the groups perform, evaluate them, grade them, tell them that what they did right or wrong, and awards were given. One of my favorite anecdotes from when I first started here, I was looking through a lot of our archives, and I found an old adjudication sheet from, I think, 1953. And one of the comments that the adjudicator had written was, Celeste's hair is all wrong. And I thought to myself, how is that actually helping these groups? And just seeing how much that has shifted. And so rather than it being competitive, and again, there's a long history behind that structure, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value there, but we started asking, what if we reframe this as learning rather than judgment? So a few years ago, and this is pre me joining Theatre Saskatchewan, we changed the format of our adjudications to being production workshops. So the focus is more on education rather than a grade. And as that has continued to develop, groups are asked questions about their production, why they made the choices that they made. Sometimes it has to do with, the facility that they're in their hometown. Maybe it has to do with the logistics of who's in the room. And yes, we need this person to be playing all three of these roles because they're the only person that showed up, right? Then they're given practical ideas and skills to take home to help build on the work that's happening in their communities. What works in Regina isn't going to be the same thing that works in North Battleford, isn't going to be the same thing that works in Bigger, isn't going to be the same thing that works in, Lloydminster. And so this has helped to create a completely different energy around festival. These production workshops have tons of people that aren't even involved in that production come because they're learning things as well. They get to see scenes kind of re-envisioned by our facilitator and given ideas and taking down notes. And it's just been so exciting seeing that, like feeling that energy that's in the room. So also instead of groups feeling like they're being judged, they're feeling supported. And instead of it being just about the competition, we're creating a space for collaboration and shared learning. A couple just quick examples. At Theatre Fest in 2024, which was in North Battleford, we had 7 productions. We had over 1,600 participants and audience members come through. But more importantly, the feedback we got was about how it felt. People said that this was what festival could be at its best. We got support, education, connection with people across the province. We are a provincial organization. And so, having folks from all corners of the province has been incredible. We also shrank our apprentice program, which used to have like upwards of 20 folks in it, to being 8 participants in order to focus on the quality, on one-on-one time, and the opportunity to actually absorb and have some of those discussions that actually lead to deeper learning. Building on that momentum last spring at our Theatre One Festival in Melfort, we tried something new. So instead of the traditional kind of like everyone's in the same stream, we had 3 small cohorts, one-on-one mentorship in directing, stage management, and acting. So the participants then worked with local scripts. So they were learning practical skills while engaging with Saskatchewan stories. And on the final night, they got to present what they'd created. So what really made that work, though, was the quality of attention. Small groups, real mentorship, permission to try new things in a supported environment. And I had alluded to having to pivot. This may have been before the call started, but I had chatted a bit about, having to pivot mid programming. And this is the program where that happened. The cohort that we had came to myself and they were like, there's something in this that just isn't working. And so we were able to like pause the program, have a conversation, shift things the way that they needed to be. And the feedback I got that these folks were met with radical empathy during that program is something that has like really stuck with me and is probably a highlight of my career. So this upcoming year, we're continuing that focus on small group mentorship at Theatre Fest 2026, which is happening in Regina, April 5th to 11th. And we're co-hosting it with the Regina Little Theatre, who is celebrating their 100th anniversary, which is really exciting. And just goes to show that so many of our groups have been around, like they've been around even longer than we have. And so having groups that are stable and have that history who are able to support some of our new groups. I have a brand new group who just joined a few months ago that is excited to be coming out and taking part in our public workshops. And just being able to see these communities come together is very exciting. I don't want to talk too much longer. I know that we're running short on time. But some of the other things, our library, which you can see part of behind me, we've really tried to focus on bringing in strictly Canadian scripts the last couple of years, with a focus on Indigenous and playwrights of color. And we also have started a script club in a box that allows our groups who may not have otherwise considered some of these scripts, because they like to go with what they know sells or what is comfortable sometimes. Just giving them the tools to be able to just come together, no pressure, read some of these scripts, ask some questions, ask what could work in their community. And these have been like flying off the shelves. One of our groups, the Battleford's Community Players this year, did a 100% Canadian season, which was really exciting. And yeah, it's just been really exciting to see the conversations that are being had between all of these theater groups, whether they're reemerging after a break or are brand new. So my approach with them has always been, what does your community need? What is your capacity? And then trying to find mentors in similar communities who have navigated this successfully. I have so many notes, and I don't know why. I know that I go off on tangents, so I should have known not to put quite this much in. But the one thing that I did want to say before I wrap this up was that it's really important that we understand that representative storytelling isn't extra work that gets added into theater. It's what we're supposed to be doing anyway. I honestly believe that when we truly reflect our community, we're strengthening them. These aren't separate goals, they're the same goal. Groups will make mistakes. I've made mistakes. That's part of the learning of this. And what matters the most is the genuine commitment to growth, the willingness to listen when things don't land quite right. And that's where having support systems and partnerships become crucial. So groups don't feel like they're navigating this alone. Creating programming that responds to actual needs rather than what we think our groups should need, providing resources to our groups that they can actually use, and making representative work feel achievable rather than overwhelming has been the biggest building of that foundation that we've been able to do. And yeah, at the end of the day, this is why I'm in this work. Community theater brings neighbors together. And in small communities, especially, the local theater company is often the cultural anchor. When we get this right, we're creating space for stories that haven't been told yet, voices that haven't been heard, connections that might not otherwise form. And shifting the culture takes time and patience, and genuine change happens through relationship, not mandate. Yeah, I need to just say, I'm really grateful. We are the only provincially funded organization that supports vocational theater in Saskatchewan. We are very, very fortunate to receive funding from Sask lotteries through Sask Culture, and the commitment that these funders have given to being able to grow this work, and who are excited about these shifts and not just, doing the status quo of the things that we've been doing for the last 97 years, are the reason that we've been able to make such huge progress in this area. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity that I've had to be part of Theatre Saskatchewan. And I'm really excited to see the work continue. And I really believe that the Saskatchewan arts community is so incredible, and we're doing incredible work. And I believe that our future is strong. And as long as we keep our communities at the center of the work that we're doing, that we can, again, like Danielle said, we can change the world. We really can. I believe in the power of art. I believe in the power of theater. And I'm just so grateful that I had a chance to be in this room and chat a little bit about the work that I've been fortunate to support these past few years. So thanks, Tyrell.
Thank you so much. This is really a great segue. I think if we can spotlight the three of us, this is really incredible. just myself, Danielle, and Nena. And I know we have like 18 minutes ish because I know folks might want to go back to, back to work. This is lunch break and all of that. So we'll try to make it. That's it. If we can spotlight the three of us just to see a lot of questions. For me, this 6 months, spotlight on the work we do here. There is no agenda. There is no hidden agenda. It's for us to come together to start reimagining what what we can do, for us to know what is happening in other spaces. I think that there are times that we're so much consuming what we're doing that we don't know, and it's not pointing accusing finger at anyone. Our mandate, we're trying to pursue our mandate that we then, because we have to laser focus on that. Danielle has to think of funding for that. That's for you have to think of, and other organizations that, at times we don't necessarily know what is happening in other spaces. So part of the goal is for us to come together in a really that heart of that mindset of building relationship, and hopefully some partnership can start, some ideas can start percolating from there. So with that, both of you kind of speak to two strong things: approach and partnership. And I wanted to, and I know there's a question there in the chat, which we're going to come to. You spoke to your approach in terms of being relational and things like that. And I wanted to ask, for both of you, how might we, as a province, what need to shift in the approach that we have that can help us to further restate, re-emphasize, continually work within this mindset or this approach that can help us to forge, a sustainable partnership.
Honestly, Taiwo, I think that conversations like this are such an important starting place. A lot of partnerships I've seen come from who you know, right? And if I know that something is going on with another organization that is similar to work that we're wanting to support, it makes more sense to partner with folks, right? But if I don't know that's happening, and I don't necessarily know the people that are involved with that, then there's no way for us to know. And at the end of the day, like, yes, funding is what it is. We're not seeing huge funding increases right now. And so if there's any way that like we can partner on things and share some of those costs and the overhead and resources, that's going to be huge. And I think that honestly, conversations like this and just getting people in a room together is one of the most important starting points.
Yeah, building off of that, Nina, I think mutualization is really important administratively. I know this kind of will touch, Taiwo, to your question right after I spoke about how do we synergize that administration provincially, but also Shola's question in the chat about how has arts management influenced artistic practice in Saskatchewan. I actually think all of these are going to answer the same question. So I know I'm tackling a lot here in what I'm attempting to say, but we have a really special province in Saskatchewan. I've been fortunate to have places and conversations nationally around the future of the art sector and how Commonweal can advocate for that, representing artists in Saskatchewan. And other provinces do not have the kind of cost sharing and partnership models that are embedded into our arts ecosystem. And I think it's easy. I'm born and raised in Saskatoon, Nina, I believe you're born and raised Regina. And so when you've lived here your whole life, we can almost like not realize how special some of that energy for collaboration and partnership is. I think, for example, of the Admin Center for Culture, Sport, and Recreation, and the ways that they provide concrete support to different organizations across arts and culture and sport, whether it's as boring and simple as payroll, pension, health benefits, being able to collaborate to provide those to our artists and professionals and administrators is something that other provinces are like, how did y'all manage to do that? And they're shocked and they don't understand how it works. And so I think that the birth of like socialism through Saskatchewan and a lot of that energy, like Tommy Douglas, birth of healthcare, that is really rooted in our culture as prairie people. And that's so special. So I think that we have a bit of an advantage in that because of our distance as a province between our different centers, we've had to be really scrappy and creative in how we get projects over the line. Yes, with partnerships, and it's who you know, but also it's making an effort to attend other people's events and not just in traditional theater spaces. I think it's looking for opportunities for collaboration in organizations that are not doing what you already do. Because it's easier to collaborate in your own sector where you understand the same language and you use the same payment structures and you communicate under the same umbrellas of terms and terminology and expectations. But where the magic can really happen is when we create new interdisciplinary possibilities that we didn't imagine. One, by sharing our resources and our knowledge, our special sectoral zoomed in information and knowledge. But also, not everyone needs to be an administrative powerhouse. And I think if all of our organizations provincially are trying to do that same administrative work, most artists don't want to. Let's be honest, they want to make art. They want to be in the community making art. And so this is a little bit of a structural challenge I think we have right now artistically and provincially is that there are limits on how many, for example, like project grants you can apply for under one administrative umbrella. This is something that Commonweal, we have a lot of expertise in how to get a project from start to finish over the line in various stages of production. We are often limited by the barriers put in place by either funders or other sector expectations that say, oh, well, you're working in this, so we won't offer you funding to do this. When in reality, our staff are supporting a grassroots organization or collective who don't want to become their own nonprofit. They don't want to be incorporated. They don't want a board. They don't need it. But what they do need is the structure and support and stability that an organization like Commonweal can bring. And I think that that partnership model is not quite understood. And so it can almost be looked at kind of with suspicion or like how are you trying to do, like it's not understood why we would want to be in supporting these initiatives that are not birthed immediately from our own staff. But how we look at it as an organization is that we're responding to community need. We're noticing the gaps and we're saying, hey, we have the skills and the experience to support your artistic vision and do the pieces you don't want to learn how to do anyway. How can we get that over the line? So I know, sorry, I rambled for a bajillion
No, no,
minutes.
thanks, Daniel. I don't know, Nena, if you want to add to that, but I'm happy to go on and ask. There's another question I wanted to ask. For me personally, virtually all the art organization in the province, I've worked with them. I can see Brian Hammond there, Persephone Theatre. We run a national art leadership training program. Of course, come on, Weal. We've done stuff together with our production a few years ago. Future Prairie Theatre with Theatre Saskatchewan. I'm in the university. Like for me, I feel like we need to start thinking about partnership beyond. This is my program. This is my cubicle. And all that.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings me to the next question I want to ask for both of you in your lens and where your vantage. What are the critical things we need to start asking ourselves now in our province, Saskatchewan, that can help make the sector thrive? And you don't have to respond to that now if you've not thought about it. And you can but I think that part of, for me, the essence of this series is for us to start having this collective conversation. I love the individual imagination in the various organizations, and you're doing amazing stuff. But I'm saying, what do we need to start thinking collectively? Because, and I think Danielle, I've mentioned this before when I was on the board, when Commonwealth gets a funding for a particular project, it also means that another person, organization is not getting it. If Theatre Saskatchewan gets it, another is not getting it. If you get something, that means that it's the way funding works, right? And that is not just Commonwealth. That's just the way the funding works. It's the same for Theatre Saskatchewan. It's the same for every of us. We're all fighting this little thing. And once I get it, I'm like, yeah, I got it. But it also means that somebody else did not get it. That in itself brings, there's a lot of complexity around that. So as a province, and just funding as an example, as a province, what are the things we need to start talking about or we need to start acting on that can help us to thrive as a sector?
I think equity is imperative because the people who are invited to the table are the same people who've been invited to the table for the last 50 years. And there is some incredible art that is happening that is not being funded at all in any way, shape, or form. And they're still getting it over the line. Like, I know I'm very biased in the spoken word poetry and kind of slam scene because that's kind of where my own artistic practice was born from. Not the provincial organization, Spoken Word Canada, all the local arts none of them were incorporated. None of them had formal charitable status. And that was a benefit and a risk because when challenges came, when capacity was tested, the sector fell apart. Like there is no longer a Spoken Word Canada organization that can support smaller grassroots spoken word initiatives. It was so grassroots that it did not have the support to weather some of the storms that came its way. And then we look at other sectors that have artistic sectors, perhaps, that have had a lot of money pumped into them historically over time. And a lot of that is rooted in colonialism and is rooted in what the institution determined valuable to fund. So I know it's controversial, but I think we need to look at reallocation of funding operationally. Not everyone needs to be an administrative organization, but then are there flexible models for co-application in funding that we can pursue? Because right now everything is framed as a competition. And I think that mindset has prevented collaboration and mutual reciprocity because you're right. If someone's getting a grant, another person isn't. And how do we create a structure where instead of there is an open competition for funding, do we remove that language? Can we reassess some of those structures of how our limited resources are being used? Maybe there is a way to encourage partnership-based initiatives being funded to encourage a culture of sharing and collaboration and reciprocity, especially when we're talking about physical space. Like, how do we have multiple organizations and groups benefiting from a physical space? And instead of looking at the ownership of that in such an individual or organizational mechanism, how do we look at that? This is a resource for our province and our community. Maybe it's not changing dollars to have that collaboration met. So those are some of my initial ideas of your question.
I'm going to pass it to Nena. I know Chance is here on this call. It's beautiful that we know ourselves, so it's really great. And Chance, I'm going to reach out to you at some point because I think the piece around resource, not just funding, but even framing it around resource, might that be something we can do together with your organization, with your office over there to start bringing us together to have this kind of conversation. Because I think that for us as a research center, that's part of what we're in the ecosystem to be able to bring us together. So Chance, you're going to get an email from us for sure. I want to go to Nena because I think that again, just for you to offer your thoughts on that question, and then I know we have 4 more minutes, but we will be able to wrap
Certainly,
it.
I will try to be quick, which is hard for me. The one thing that is really encouraging, just jumping off of what Danielle said, is that some of these conversations are starting with our funders. I know that this is something that Sask Culture is really investing a lot of like time and community consultation around right now. And we don't work nearly as closely with Sask Arts, but I know that they have started some of these and have implemented some like really incredible different funding models, which I think are really great for us to look at for inspiration. I know that within Theatre Saskatchewan, we also provide some funding for our member groups, and restructuring that around, making sure that it is equitable, that no matter how many people have applied at a funding deadline, that we are asking the same questions about every single application. It isn't about whether or not somebody on our jury knows, someone that is part of this member group. It is about whether or not they're answering these questions and what that work is doing. And with that, I think another important question for us to ask is, what is our intention? At the end of the day, what are we trying to accomplish? Because if we know that, then we don't need to be as prescriptive about the way that we get to that end result. I find that in my career, I've found a lot of people are like, but this is how we do this. This is how we've always done this. And so that's great, but why? Like, why? What is this big thing here that we are trying to accomplish? Because how we get there doesn't matter. As long as people are being treated with kindness and respect, and we are creating a community that actually is solving some of these problems that come up and are meeting people with empathy, then we can try different models. We can take risks. We can do some of that research to maybe try something new, maybe throw out something that isn't working anymore. And that can be really scary, especially with organizations and funders that have been around for decades, right? If we are so committed to doing things the way that they've always been, I really think that we're doing ourselves a disservice because we don't have room to explore and discover a better opportunity and a better approach.
This is great. Thank you so much. Last year, my theater company were thinking of doing something in the U.S., and then we got to know about what is called fiscal sponsorship. So we didn't have to incorporate my theater company in the U.S., Theatre International. There's an existing some organizations like that where we go to them, and then they work with us to be able to do all of this admin and things like that. The long existing organizations have a purpose. The new one have a purpose. What I'm hearing is us coming together to forge a path that can help us advance and make our sector thrive in the province. I really want to say thank you to Danielle and Nena for opening this series for us. Thank you to all that are here. I can see Kate from the University of Regina Library. Thank you so much. Of course, Brian from Persephone Theatre. I can see my folks at the center, and of course, Chance. And then we look forward to our second series, second episode that is happening next month. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Let's continue for our sector to continue to thrive. Good job, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, friends.
You have been listening to Global Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina. For more details about the center, visit www.cset.ca.